Reddit. Who was the worst criminal you've ever had to detain? What did they do? The earliest memorable person is a 16-year-old who killed 2 men by stabbing them in the head with a screwdriver. He was just acting the hard man in front of his mates and picked on these 2 guys for nothing. The thing that got me was his complete lack of remorse or regret. I'd never properly understood what a psychopath was until then. Edit. My mistake, he was 17 at the time of the murders. I had dealt with him before when he was 16, so I mixed up the ages. Also, it was in Ireland. Jesus Christ. How does one manage this level of insanity? I don't know. It was pretty brutal. Only 1 stab wound each, but massive damage. I've only been in the police force for just over 18 months now and have just got off being a probationary constable here in Australia and haven't seen or attended anything too horrifying in comparison to some of the other posts here in the thread. So I thought I would share a story that my dad had experienced in the force. I believe this was about 8 years ago now. My old man was a detective and had been copper since he was 18. He had been a detective for over 10 years prior to the occurrence, so he had seen and experienced some horrible things, so it was fair to say he was somewhat climatized. But I know this did shake him to the core for some time. He and his partner had received a call to attend a homicide scene at residence that was known to the police. It was home to a couple who were heroin addicts and had 4 children. The youngest being around 6 months old, don't know the other ages, but they were all under the age of 10. What had happened was the mother went out to go get the couple's next fix and left the father to look after the kids. Allegedly, the young baby was crying and crying for some time, and from what I know, the dad couldn't cope with it any longer. So in order to shut the baby up, he placed the baby in the microwave and turned it on for over 10 minutes. The police attended the scene after a neighbor heard screaming and was always concerned for the children's welfare. The other kids suffered from abuse and were badly malnourished, and CPS finally removed the kids and placed them into foster care. I have had to deal with drop kicks so far, but I pray to the Almighty that I never have to see such things like this. Holy Mother of God, with this. You mentioned that the residence was known to the police, so I can't help but wonder why those children weren't taken away earlier. Yours and other stories make me think that sterilizing some people could reduce suffering in the world. This couple, for instance, should have been snipped to prevent further making more children to torture. You and many others are of the same opinion. It was just a blatant failure of CPS to correctly do their jobs to protect the children. The story was kept quite hush-hush to avoid leaking to the media, as it would create a shitstorm and a mountain of bad publicity would fall upon CPS, but I'm almost certain it did come out after the sentencing. I will try and find a link. You're right through, some people are just a blight on society. Received a call from a concerned neighbor in an apartment complex. She advised a female upstairs was screaming for help. Me and my partner conducted a knock and talk, and a very large male answered the door wearing boxers. We asked him if anyone else was in the apartment. He looked back towards the bedroom, turned and looked back at us and paused for a second and then said no. Me and my partner looked at each other, sensing something was wrong. We looked down and observed blood on the tile floor and made entry due to exigent circumstances. I spoke with the male in the living room and I see he was getting extremely worried. My partner walked into the bedroom and I see his face lose its color. He stepped back and started shouting, "Lock his ass up now." He then tried to make a run for it. After he was detained, we returned to the room and I saw a girl locked in a dog cage, beaten half to death. The investigation revealed he had been holding her hostage in the apartment for several months, scraping her and pimping her out to scumbags and forcing her to eat dog food. She was unable to stand. I believe both legs and arms were broken. Both eye sockets were so badly broken and bruised they swelled up over her eyes. The bed sheet, which I could only assume was once white, was completely covered in blood stains. I've been on the scene of somewhere around 100 plus murders, countless auto fatalities and everything in between, and to this day it's just about the only thing that gets to me. I couldn't understand how someone could be that evil. When I returned to my patrol vehicle to run their information, I looked at her driver's license photo and couldn't recognize her. That's how badly she had been beaten. I've seen her once since the incident. She is now blind in both eyes and can still hardly walk. It sucks to think about how many times I've been at that apartment building on other calls while she was locked in a cage and had probably been standing just feet away from her. The entire time the suspect was in my back seat, he was just staring me down through my rear view mirror with the smuggest fucking grin on his face. I had to step out of the car and get away from him because I was getting so worked up. I don't think Teresa punishment severe enough, that monster. You guys ever find any of those other scumbags? Any and all foreign DNA on her or in that room would lead to a guilty person, I'd think. I believe they also arrested another female who was connected to the suspect and knew what was going on. Not sure about any other arrests. I work at a large agency, Once the case is handed off to the detectives, you don't hear much else until court. This guy and his wife start fighting in their apartment in South Los Angeles. It escalated into the guy picking up the 5-month-old baby and charging at the wall with the baby's head as a battering ram. He then threw the infant out of the 3rd-floor window. As I sat in the front of my police car with this guy cuffed in the back seat, all I could think about was a Pulp Fiction type turn around and put a hole in his head so it would ever happen again. It was very early in my career and made me think about whether I could handle 25 to 30 years of these kinds of things and what kind of person it would turn me into. The child actually survived and the man convicted. I'd put this incident away in a little sealed box in my head and forgotten about it until seeing this thread. Now I'm sweating and angry again. Edit for some additional info as I've sat and thought about this. I know that the baby had a fractured skull and they were concerned about brain damage and the neck/spine. I know that the child survived, but I never followed up because I completely put this out of my head and until the thread popped up. You could say that I'd completely forgotten about it. The best I can recall was that the guy got 18 years prison. Thanks for all the concern and support. I'm okay, but just for good measure I might have a chat with the Department of Psychologist about it. It's a big city. Bad things happen and as the hydraulic press channel would say, we must deal with it. Some things get to you more than others, but for the most part we learn how to deal with it and not take it home with us at the end of the day. I've been on 23 years with a few more to go yet. With all I've seen and done, I have one rule that I live and work by. Treat everyone as well as they will let you treat them. It has served me well. I was a detective in the town I worked at, and of course had to cover calls on a rotation. I was on call on Halloween one night and got a call about a shooting that had just occurred in a fairly decent part of the town I worked in. I was already out due to another incident and decided to head on that way figuring if there was anything to it, I would get called anyways. Being that it was Halloween in the part of town, I of course thought this was just another prank call. As I'm heading to the call, dispatch advised that they are getting multiple calls and reports of multiple victims. With this, I realized this probably wasn't a prank call and actually ended up being the first person on scene. Turns out that some kids were trick-or-treating and when they knocked on the door of this one house, the guy inside freaked out and unloaded an entire magazine through the glass door, into 2 kids and the father. The kids being over 10 but less than 14. The oldest child took most of the bullets, killing him. The father and the younger child survived. I then spent 3 hours interviewing the suspect. I've interviewed a lot of suspects, murderers included, and this was the most mentally and physically exhausting interview of my life. That was almost 8 years ago and the whole thing still haunts me. Was the fellow out of it mentally, or was he totally cognizant during the interview? Like, was he obviously unstable with a house of hoarded trash and the whole 9 yards, or just a gun nut psychopath? That's fucking brutal. And on Halloween, geesh. Not out of it mentally, he was a competent man in his early 20s. Had a family that was home with him that night. His lifestyle led up to that moment as he claimed that he thought he was getting robbed. Was this in Sumter? I remember this case. Absolutely sickening. It wasn't even late if I recall correctly, and the house light was on signaling the house was good for trick-or-treaters. The dude was all methed out and thought they were coming to get him. That's it, apparently he thought he was getting robbed again and just freaked out. Dealing drugs had caused him to become extremely paranoid. Arrested a doctor for battery against female patients. I've had partners of mine arrest even more awful people, like child rapists, but this man I actually arrested. He would only target his female clients who were mental health patients, so that many of their claims were overlooked due to their existing bipolar disorders or depression. He was a POS and his wife sat next to him the entire trial. True love, right? He lost his medical license, but we lost the case due to almost half of his victims refusing to testify and his high-dollar, very educated attorney. Oh boy. Grabbed a guy walking down the street with a shotgun and one of those 12-can beer holders cigarette companies used to give away. Yeah, I'm old. We get the cuffs on him and he starts getting all chatty and car about all the other guns that he has. One thing leads to another and we use his statement to get a warrant to get the rest of the guns. We go to the apartment with the warrant and there are hundreds of different firearms and corresponding boxes of ammo and we start cataloging it and carrying it out. Then we notice cases of photo albums and videotapes and, it's CP. I take random samples and as difficult as it is, and to the normal human being, it's difficult shit, confirm that it's children being photographed. It's logical that given the sampling that the rest of it was CP, too. Well, not enough for the ADA who took the case. I explained to her how we arrived at the number and she said that in order for him to be charged for all the CP, that I would have to testify that all of it was indeed CP. I was the arresting officer, I was swearing out the complaint, and I also had to make sure asshole went to jail for a very long time. I sat in a room in the station house for hours on end going through hundreds of photo albums full of children being destroyed. I viewed videotapes of innocence being swept away, and in the end, I wept. I did not stop weeping for days. 20 some odd years later, I still have my moments, and every so often I'll see a kid that looks familiar and I'll think. It haunts me constantly because I couldn't save them. I'm supposed to defend the ones that can't defend themselves. That was my sacred vow, and yet, all I could do was catalog their horror. Years later, I was a first responder to the World Trade Center attacks and saw horrors that no person should ever have to see, and yet, 9/11 wasn't close to being my worst day on that job. Thanks again, Reddit, for letting me rant. As fellow civil servant, medic, and a parent of 2 boys, I applaud your determination to give that scumbag his just desserts, as well as the fortitude to make it through viewing all those videos and pictures. I couldn't imagine the horrors that you viewed. Thanks for the great job you guys do. Everyone talks about the cops and the firemen, but the real unsung heroes of the street are the medics and EMTs. This might be a little different, and I'm late to the party, but here goes. A few years ago we get sent as the second car to a family disturbance, sent as routine. Halfway there we get updated to roll code 3 to a shots fired call. At the same house. We arrive and there is a young man with what looks like a stick in his hand lying on the ground, already 0, dead. My partners have an older man in handcuffs in the back of their unit. After speaking to a lady, the wife, and another young man, son, who were home, the story comes out. The family disturbance was the deceased young man breaking a chair and hitting his dad with the broken chair legs. Dad gets gun, warns son, son doesn't stop, dad shoots son in face and kills him. I will never forget the way the father looked me in the eye and said, "I'm going to hell for this, aren't I?" Did he get off on self-defense? Yes, he did. Apparently the son was trying to steal from the house as he had in the past and didn't live there. I have never had to fire my weapon on duty, and I pray to God I never have to shoot a stranger. I won't ever understand how the father must have felt. Triple homicide suspect fled and was spotted by an officer in our city about 30 minutes after the last person he shot. High-speed pursuit at around 120 miles per hour for 12 miles until he crashed and rolled his car. He was so disoriented it made it easy to arrest him. He had an arsenal in his car, and I'm sure he would have shot at us if not for rolling his car first. It was crazy coming down from the feeling of preparing to shoot and possibly kill somebody. I thought for sure it was going to be a shootout when he stopped. Then I rode with him to the hospital in an ambulance. Got to talking with him and realized I went to school with him and knew his family. Really messed up. These are the kind of people that don't get to be a burden on society. A shotgun shell is only like 50 cents. A fellow who molested a number of his preteen daughter's friends. He'd have her invite them over for movies and such, then drugged their Sunny D, and you can imagine the rest. We never figured out exactly how many girls he raped, but we were able to prove up 28 counts. The arrest was not particularly satisfying. Having to be near him and listen to his diatribe made me feel unclean. His conviction and subsequent long sentence made me feel like being a cop was worth it at least 1% of the time. What was the gist of his speech? I don't recall exactly, but essentially the usual rant about how his rights were being violated. They weren't, how we had no evidence, we did, how he was being framed, like anyone cared enough about his very existence to bother with that, etc., ad nauseam. It wasn't so much the content of his speaking as the fact of it that was offensive. This brings another question to mind: which type of offender is usually the most offensive/indignant? I can't really imagine it's rapists that are caught red-handed, but people do weird things mentally. From experience, they all are. No one is ever guilty, everyone is always framed, the arrest is always unconstitutional, and the system is always corrupt. The offenders are the worst though, because their excuses are the most sickening. Edit, I would like to clarify, I'm not a police officer, I am a court staff attorney, but I do work almost exclusively on criminal matters. I have the utmost respect for the police and other administrative officers, and trial attorneys who work on the front lines of our criminal justice system. You're stronger than I can imagine. Started out as a shoplifting call. Someone had stolen a bunch of stuff from a hospital gift shop. Surveillance footage was good, which is rare. Good enough in fact to identify the culprit as the parent of a kid who was in the ICU. Head up to the ICU to talk to her. She denies everything, but grants me consent to search the room and her belongings. Her son, of 7 years old, is in a bad state. All sorts of tubes and wires keeping him going. I can't remember what his illness was, but it had destroyed his body. I was very careful not to disturb him when searching. No luck. I head back to headquarters to write up the report. Then I get a call that mom is passed out in her car in the hospital parking garage. When I get there are empty pill bottles scattered about. Her mother is in the driver's seat, also passed out from what turned out to be a bunch of stolen pain meds. In the back seat, I see some of the stolen property from the gift shop. After I get them both awake and cuffed, and begin writing up what would be my first felony arrests, hospital security tells me they found the rest of the stolen property under her son's mattress. This kid's mom had somehow managed to move this poor, fragile, barely clinging on to life kid, so she could hide over $1,000 worth of stolen stuff under his mattress. And then, to celebrate, she promptly abandoned him to join grandma for a pill binge, thereby depriving him of a mother both temporarily and long term, as CPS promptly sent a caseworker to take custody of the boy. When you ask most cops, we'll say the hardest calls we deal with are the ones involving kids. It's because, up until a certain age, they're pristinely innocent and can be nothing but victims when involved in a crime. But you also can see their future. I hope he pulled through, and ended up with a family that raised him right, but the reality is that more often, ignorance begets ignorance. Bad parents tend to retain custody, exploiting loopholes in a system stretched too thin, hanging on to their kids for no other reason that they can get more government welfare with a dependent to claim. They don't see a son or daughter, they see dollar signs. Had a call once in a major metropolitan area during my probation period some years ago. The fire department called us for help saying they had been threatened with by knife-wielding maniac while attempting to render aid to someone. My partner and I got there and saw the fire department just standing around, so we're thinking, okay, this guy is probably gone and we will have to just take a report for them and get to our next call. That's the first time I heard the screams of someone about to die. The shrill terror in a person's voice is completely distinguishable from your everyday scream for help, or yells of anger. It sends a shiver down your spine. My partner and I didn't have time for backup to arrive or make a tactical plan, so we entered an apartment complex by ourselves and followed the screams until we located a door we thought they were coming from. I kicked in the door and we entered to find that knife-wielding madman stabbing a woman in the chest. Shots are fired and the man goes down. As though a scene from a movie, after the shooting, backup comes running in to clear the rest of the apartment while I awkwardly handcuff this man who is bleeding all over my uniform. He's missing either his radius or ulna, one of the two wrist bones, from a bullet shattering it. There's blood everywhere, and you can smell it in the air. This is also the first time I held a person while they were dying, which isn't particularly pleasant either. The man passed shortly after in the ambulance, even with the fire department outside already. We later discovered the man was on drugs and suffering from mental illness. He had attempted to take his own life a week prior and failed, so the higher-ups believe this is how he wanted to finish himself off. The woman survived. Interesting story. I've got a question for you, or for any cops really reading that might have an answer. When something big happens like this, a big case like this, 'cause I know these things are semi-rare, it's not like something like this happens every shift, and you finish with the paperwork, yada yada, your part is finished, what happens to you? Say you still have 4 hours in what was supposed to be your shift. Do you then proceed to work the rest of your shift? Or are they saying you just arrested a guy stabbing a woman, have blood on your shirt, and just handled something huge really well, go ahead and take a personal one? Always been curious. Can't speak for other agencies, but this literally did happen like 2 hours into a 12-hour shift like you're asking. We have a special unit that investigates officer-involved shootings and totally recreates the scene. Fascinating stuff really. It took another 11 hours to finish getting interviewed, waiting for detectives, and all that. Afterwards we got assigned home as work duty for about a week until we could meet with the department shrink to make sure we're fit for duty after a traumatic experience. I see that most of these are about child molesters, so I'll switch it up a bit. This is one case among many, but it sticks out to me due to the avoidability of it all. About 2 years ago, I was called to a shooting. In the area I work, this is a weekly thing at minimum, so I wasn't really sweating it. Well, we get to the scene and several people run out of the house yelling, "She's been shot," and, "He's still inside." Based on that information, we know we have to go inside and find the shooter and the victim. Well, out comes the shooter, crying hysterically and literally covered in blood. I get to be the lucky one and put handcuffs on him. Next we go into the bedroom where the shooting occurred and find the victim lying on the bed. She was so drenched in blood that I couldn't even tell what race she was. Let me tell you, it's a sad thing to have to sit and watch a young lady and be utterly powerless to help her. Turns out, the shooter was her boyfriend. He liked to drink and come home and get into arguments, at which point he'd grab his pistol and rack it at her as a sort of sick warning. Well, that's what he did, except he, accidentally, Kept his finger on the trigger this time and sent a bullet into her brain. This story has a happy ending, though. The guy is now in prison and the female actually survived by some miracle and appears to be doing alright. It just sucks to think that so many females are going through the same thing but refuse to get help, saying they have nowhere else to go. I understand what they're saying, but in my experience, domestic abuse never gets better. Once it starts, it only gets worse. First post. Throwaway account. I'm terrible with dates and time frames if I didn't write it down, but I'll never forget October 26, 2013. This was in Brooklyn. Squad called an 85 at such and such address. A neighbor had called in an assault in progress and the detective squad happened to be on the block for another reason. They got there fast and met the perp coming out the front door. We get there a couple minutes after as the perp is being walked in handcuffs to the car. I went into the house to see if everybody was okay and what the 85 was about. Long story short, perp hacked a woman and her 4 kids, infant to 12 years old, to death with a meat cleaver. Mom and oldest were still breathing when we came in the door, but not for long after that. 3 babies were all in the back bedroom. The apartment looked pretty much like what you would imagine if you tried to imagine something like that. You could taste the blood in the air, there was so much of it. When I walked out to get a look at the perp, a detective told me, "See if you can get his name but don't ask him anything else." Guy was seated in the back seat in handcuffs and had a look in his eyes that I can't even describe here. The devil was let loose in that apartment. I don't want to blow up your spot, but I remember that case. The guy was jealous of his brother's family and success, so he murdered his family? I can't imagine how terrible that scene was. The one that stands out the most was my first domestic violence arrest. This guy was the absolute worst of the worst. Verbal and physical abuse, stealing the money for his pregnant wife and firstborn to eat and blowing it all on booze and pokies, and culminating in him using industrial glue to seal his 4-month pregnant partner's lips shut, requiring her to be hospitalized in the hopes it would cause the fetus to terminate. Family violence section had been hunting this dirt bag for months, but he was a slippery customer. Anyway, one night we get a call from a local pub saying a guy had gotten maggoted, and gotten into a car. They got the number plate and I recognized it as being this little scrote. It helped that ironically his number player was Roddle code for drink driving, and his direction of travel was listed as being towards where I knew the girl lived. My partner and I set some kinda land speed record getting there, but found no trace of his car in the surrounding area. We knew he was nearby though. Sometimes you just feel these things. So we woke the, still pregnant, girl up and explained to her we believed she was in imminent danger, and that we would stay in the area. Gave her the response mobile phone number to ring, and a phrase to say, rather than call dispatch, which can cause a delay in sending out the job. Then, we left. We both got in the car, and drove around the corner. I dropped my partner off and he doubled back to keep an eye on the front of the house while I parked up around the corner, and our sergeant arrived in an unmarked car to view the street behind the house. Sure enough, within 10 minutes of us leaving, we suspect he had been hiding out waiting for us to leave. Old mate saunters up the driveway and makes a beeline for the door where he is confronted by my partner. Realizing he has been tricked, he punches my partner square in the jaw. Now for the record, my partner at the time was an absolute beast of a man who was more offended by the fact somebody had laid hands on him than he was injured. Let's just say the next few minutes went poorly for our young Casanova as me and the Sarge came herring around the corner to assist with the arrest. Sadly, we never got a conviction on the scrote, but we were able to get assistance from family violence to help the victim pack up and move interstate away from the situation. It still annoys me that he would go on to offend against other women, but at least we managed to help that one woman. She did make contact with our family violence section some time later, and they tell me she is doing well. Sometimes in this job you have to take your victories where you can get them. I honestly feel that the majority of the people I arrest aren't bad people and aren't criminals, per se. That being said, there are a couple dozen arrests that stand out in my mind. One in particular sticks out, not necessarily the worst, just one that sticks out the most. The suspect was approximately 40-ish, had a 15-year-old daughter. Was a methamphetamine addict, lived in complete squalor. They get evicted and daughter gets taken into state custody. After a year of counseling, finally discloses that her father would inject her with methamphetamine and grape her. Therapist comes to us and we bring her in for an interview. This girl, I believe may have been 17 by now, is no girl. She's intelligent, articulate and lived well beyond her years. She details in remarkable detail how one night her father injects methamphetamine right into her right forearm. This happens several times. One night he is extremely high, gets her high. And as she is walking into the kitchen he pins her against the wall and grapes her. This begins to happen on a regular basis. Suspect eventually convinces daughter to start bringing friends home. Suspect injects friends with meth too and does the same to them as well. Daughter continues to bring different friends home so that dad will grape the friends rather than her. Eventually when they get evicted, the father kicks daughter to the curb and two of daughter's friend go live out of dad's car in a nearby park. While these kinds of things happen all the time, it was the victim that struck me. When asked why she didn't tell someone, she replied, "The first time it happened when he pinned me against the wall. All I could remember thinking over and over, this is my life now. This is my life now. I will remember those words for the rest of my life, as clear as they were said to me. I can still hear the inflection and tone in her voice." About 8 months later I ran into one of the other victims, the daughter's friend. After dad was evicted he lived out of his car with her. She was 15-ish at the time. Initially she was going to cooperate in prosecution, however, disappeared. She's 18 or 19 now. When I last saw her I didn't recognize her until I saw her identification. Heroin, meth and the streets have destroyed her. She won't be alive much longer. To clarify, this guy had got the girls hooked on meth so they actually moved into his car? The second girl, the daughter's friend, was hooked on heroin I believe, which is how he got her to stay with him. What happened to the daughter? The last time I saw her was at court some months afterwards. She had been in state's custody in a foster home and seemed to be doing well. That being said, she was going to turn 18 soon and would then be on her own. I haven't seen her on the streets since, which is a good sign.